Those of you know I will be debating Ukraine later tonight with a conspiracy theorist. Uh, that'll be fun. But obviously, I've been doing a lot of research and reading up on this for tonight at 7 o'clock tonight on the channel. So come along and join in, please, for moral support. But of course, this is an incredibly serious topic at the moment. And not only that, what happens here in Ukraine could very well determine also the future of other Eastern European countries. Because there is a reason why a lot of these countries wanted to join NATO. It was because they didn't want to be bullied around and pushed around, well, by Russia. And this is the fate where Ukraine finds itself in now. And we've got very obviously worrying tensions around this. These are still very, very high at the moment. There are diplomatic talks, of course, going on. And as again, I've said before, I do not want this to obviously escalate into a war. There is every chance that it could develop that way. But of course, I will be, of course, in any event of that, supporting Ukraine. And if anyone says that Ukraine's going to attack Russia, Ukraine would never, ever attack Russia. It knows the consequences of what would happen. Ukraine would never do that. It would only ever, ever act defensively if attacked. It ain't got a chance in hell of actually beating Russia in an open war. So there's that. But of course, this does create a lot of other worries for not only other countries connected to them. Finland, the Baltic states, so Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Moldova, Romania, so all these countries are indeed quite worried about what could go on here. So before we do go diving into that and find out more about the concerns, because again, I think it's very important to air their views of what they find worrying and troubling about this. So let's remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can now buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those who do support the channel that way. So on with the article. So this comes from The Guardian with the title of "From Eastern Europe, we watch Ukraine in fear. Its fate could decide the continent's future." 2 points about the Ukrainian crisis are crystal clear. First, Vladimir Putin wishes to reimpose Russian control over Ukraine, whatever the price. His political dream of restoring the Soviet sphere of influence is echoed in his wish list of security guarantees presented to the Western governments by Russia in December of 2021. NATO, he maintains, should return to the pre-1997 state of affairs. Russia apparently need not. Second, whatever Putin decides in the current crisis, there are real fears in Central and Eastern Europe that the settled borders are now under threat. These fears are grounded in reason. What seemed unrealistic in the immediate post-war Cold War years is now a real possibility. And questions about our collective safety and security have returned, along with memories of a very traumatic and not so remote past. More precisely, we are talking about that one fear. The Central and Eastern European angst is existential in nature. In the 1980s, the Czech France writer Milan Kundera wrote that small nations are constantly anxious about their existence because their independence is repeatedly questioned. As doubt is cast ever over their presence on the map, they experience their sovereignty in a very fragile, nervous way. The Russian military menace to Ukraine reawakens the old traumas and, paradoxically, not only those generated from the East. Another angst is, to put it bluntly, that the West will abandon us again. Historical precedent for Western inaction is used in the current discourse to support for doing nothing. The Guardian columnist Simon Jenkins, for example, noted, as he argued against NATO military intervention in Ukraine, is the West wisely did not intervene in Hungary in 1965 or Czechoslovakia in 1968. For the Central and Eastern Europeans, drawing such parallels proves that the Russians are not only the ones who persist in framing today's events in terms of the Cold War. The Ukraine crisis can only be interpreted profoundly by differently depending on which side of the Iron Curtain you sit. This difference of perspective provokes its own misinterpretations and indeed distrust. And the evaluation of embassy staff, the evacuation from the embassy staff from Kiev may be understood as a prudent precautionary measure from the UK perspective, but for people in Central and Eastern Europe, it can have quite a very different meaning. It suggests a readiness to withdraw that reawakens follows the trauma of being forced to be part of the Soviet bloc. The instability, of course, of the US foreign policy in recent years is another source for anxiety in Central and Eastern European countries, not least because of the withdrawal from US troops from Afghanistan has forced many US allies to reconsider their strategic security priorities. But why should one listen to Eastern Europe's anxieties when, especially given the ambiguity of their government demonstrated towards the EU and the rule of law? It is worth remembering that the governments of Poland and Hungary have an electoral legitimacy, but don't fully represent their polarized societies, not to mention the entire region. Yet, in Warsaw, Vilnius, Riga, and Tallinn, the mood is full of anxiety. Nervous questions are asked. Are the Western governments reliable allies? Why not defend Ukraine with full conviction? Why not rethink the geopolitical context of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline if upholding European values means anything? Many citizens of Central and Eastern Europe have clear memories of living through and under Moscow's rule. For them, 30 years of independence is not long enough to banish that worry away that they are indeed trapped in a cycle of ever-repeating history. A Cold War framing of the Ukraine crisis undermines the interpretability, perhaps, of the democratic legitimacy in the whole region. Thinking in terms of spheres of influence takes us back to a time when the Soviet satellite countries were unable to even freely decide which military alliance or even political regime they aspired to belong to. That should be remembered today is that during the Euromaidan crisis back in 2013 and 2014, there were Ukrainians ready to sacrifice their lives to join Europe. And the EU and NATO were found to prevent history from repeating itself. Is the West really ready to commit to democratic values? It should defend Ukraine. Western countries should not accept a return to the outdated, the outdated logic of spheres of influence. A decisive response to Putin's belligerence is needed. At the moment, that is a diplomatic one. The so-called Normandy front talks involve France, Germany, Ukraine, and Russia, and should continue in an expanded form with the US in an effort to try and de-escalate the crisis. But any Western decision will have far-reaching consequences for Europe. Further geopolitical instability would affect Central and Eastern Europe militarily, economically, and in terms of migration. There is also a risk that this geopolitical distress could reinforce the region's turn towards nationalism. Fear, as Cardinal Rez famously remarked, is the passion that weakens judgment most, and the fate of Europe will be decided in Ukraine. So I do very much agree with a lot of what's been said here. What happens in Ukraine right now is very worrying, and it will set a standard for how Putin progresses in the future. If Putin stops here, then he will know that he maybe can't get away with doing other stuff in the future. Whereas if he does get what he wants, like this backwards expansion to like the back to like the 1997 borders, where Russia doesn't have to do anything, it can pretty much get to keep all its goodies it's gained so far. And guess what? It can go out and grab some more goodies from places like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, more of Ukraine. It can start to seriously throw its weight about some more in these countries. And then the democratic legitimacy, of course, these countries then does come into question. We have seen Putin, even before this time, assert misinformation campaigns to fund dissidents, groups, to, again, support his way of view and thinking. And that, again, should not be allowed. So the West, indeed, has to act here, or else it will just cause even further harm to these countries. And we should, as a West, be defending democracy. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, on your way out, please do remember to hit that again, like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and one donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And also, as well, please do come along tonight for moral support. This conversation is probably going off the rails pretty fast. It is for pure entertainment value. I'm not going to lie. It is going to be fun, probably for you, not so for me. But needless to say, come along, join us tonight at 7 o'clock GMT. And yeah, we'll hopefully see you all there.